Oops, no.
Yeah. All right. Hello, everybody. Let's get going on the webinar as well. And hello, everybody. Tara Bachland here with the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, and also here with, of course, Matthew Wood. And tonight we have a special free class with Matthew Wood on green power. And if you're wondering what the heck is green power, well, you'll find out in just a minute. But of course, it has to do with herbs. That's one hint for you there. And so, as people are joining us here, if you're here with us in the webinar, go ahead and say hello and where you're from in the chat. It's always fun to see and hear where you're all from. And you'll click on the chat icon, it'll open up a side panel. Make sure to click to share with everyone. It defaults to host and panelists. Go ahead and share with everyone so we can chat with each other, which is a lot of fun. If you're seeing this on YouTube, know that right now you can go to the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism and you can actually register to join us live right now. So if you're seeing this at the moment while we're going live and you would like to join us and ask your questions and be involved with others here in the webinar, which is a lot of fun, just go to the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism.com and you can register for Green Power right here. And know that the recording will also be available right away on YouTube. So you're welcome to stick on YouTube and enjoy it there. When you register for the webinar, of course, you'll be able to participate in the chat. And Matt usually takes some questions, does some Q&A as well. And while you're there, make sure to register for this upcoming webinar as well. I'll be interviewing Matt on how he became an herbalist. And I've been doing a series on becoming an herbalist with a variety of herbalists of all sorts and all kinds of backgrounds. And of course, we want to hear, well, how did Matt become an herbalist? Which is quite an interesting story. Each person's journey is unique and different. And it's really to help those who just love and have a passion for herbs and want to make it a part of their regular daily life and even professional life to see how that might come to fruition. Sometimes it's hard to see, especially if you grew up in an environment where herbalism wasn't a common, it wasn't down in the check boxes, right? When you graduated from high school and they're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? You're like, herbalist. And there are many ways to be an herbalist. And if you are simply a family herbalist helping your community, those around you, we need one of those people in every family. So that is highly valuable as well. And if you're curious to see the many ways that people have worked herbalism into being a profession, check out this series and definitely register for this next free class on April 10th, where I'll interview Matt. We'll be talking about how he became a herbalist. And I want to give some clues away, but we'll have to keep it for that class.
Yeah, the only bad part of the profession is you make money and therefore the federal government wants to tax you and the state too, and that's all due on April 15th. So,
Just like everybody.
yep, right.
And you might have seen at the top here that we are currently enrolling in the year one program. This is how you can become a Matthew Wood certified herbalist. And it is a very, very extensive program. I asked Matt before we started out here to maybe share a few things that he's excited about the program. And he jokingly said, but also seriously said, sometimes I just kind of put it away outside of my head because there's so much work. This has definitely been a huge passion project for to create and carry on into time. And year two and year three are right on the heels. So, Matt, other than, whew, that was a lot of work, what else might you say, or what are you excited about seeing how this is coming to fruition and the impact it'll have in the future?
Well, I just love having herbalism based upon nature wisdom, as I call it, or Natura Sophia, as it was called in the tradition down to us from the Renaissance and earlier. And that is the idea that nature is alive and there's principles and laws of nature. And oh yeah, there's my new book too. That's hard to get there. Seven Herbs. I think you can get it from our book free from our institute and for under certain circumstances on the
It's a
on my
sign
right.
up. Currently, it's a sign up bonus for those who register at the full price, and we only have four the last time we checked. So it's their last chances
I have to, well, unless we give out more, I don't mind. Yeah.
Yep.
Um,
There'll be other opportunities in the future. Yep.
yeah. Okay. So, yeah, so I like the nature wisdom, basis, and that goes back in my life all the way to age 10 or 11 when we were up on Rib Mountain, and my mentor, as he turned out, Francis Hole, the soil science professor, was up there, and he was just telling us all about the soils in Wisconsin and why that was a mountain, the only mountain in Wisconsin, really, not a very big one. And he and this feeling just came out of him. Nature is alive. Nature is alive. And that went on, and that just I knew it was true, and I knew it was like a psychic transmission, an empathic type thing. I thanked him 20 years later. I visited him in the city of Madison and thanked him there. So that was like the inspiring moment. And I'd have to say, in one way, herbalism's like a cover for me to be able to infer that nature wisdom. In another way, I just love herbalism per se. It's my life calling. Yeah, there we have some of our teachers. And yeah, and so uh great ones too. So we well, and being able to work with some of those teachers has been a very positive thing as well. And then we have uh so we have some material on that, and that's always a perspective that's behind everything that I teach and that most of our teachers teach, although they don't, let a hundred flower, as my first mentor in herbalism, during practice, Bob Gallagher from Present Moment Herbs, as he said, let a hundred flowers blossom, quoting Sherman Mao, meaning that there was infinite ways to practice herbal medicine. And in fact, it's not just that no two herbalists are ever alike. Okay, so all you guys starting out, you're all going to do it differently from everyone else. That's just a natural part of herbalism that's different from medicine. And after 15 years, you'll find that you all agree pretty much, unless you become a fanatic reductionist scientific herbalist or something like that. So that's not keen on everybody else's method. Okay, so um yeah, I guess there's other things. We are going to have a class on physiomedicalism. We found that there was questions that didn't get answered in the written material, and that we didn't have a good standalone uh, class on physiomedicalism, which is one of the two original botanical medicine movements of the 19th century that influenced Western herbalism. I would call it Anglo-American herbalism because it was very influential in England. It was very influential over here, but it survived there, did not survive here, and had to be reborn. And so we'll have a class, and that will be free for first year students. So anybody who's really excited about that subject, they can sign up as a first year student, and they would be able to watch that one for free, and then read the reading and take the test. And okay, so that's some of the stuff that makes me really happy with our first year program. Yeah.
There a specific focus for year one, year two, and year three? Maybe you can give people an overview of that as well.
Yeah, well, year one, we want people, well, basically at the end, you should know first aid, injuries, acute diseases, how to at least have an idea, um, how to approach that. And, it's hard to collect case histories, present case histories on that because you got to wait for someone to get sick. And we haven't attempted to do that. Just to make a suggestion here, Tara, we should have a class or two on that where we're actually interviewing someone who has an acute disease and we're trying to help them, either Phyllis or myself or Judy or someone.
Well,
But
we do have an upcoming case studies class that will be starting, that will be on an ongoing basis. So we could work that into the case studies.
yeah, okay. But even then, it's hard to pre-schedule an acute disease. We'd almost have to request people, okay, everybody watch for someone who's just getting sick. It sounds kind of crazy, but yeah. When I worked in the herb store, half the people were acute illnesses and half of them were chronic, I would say. 10% of them were crazy. Um, but so no, 5%. It was a lot of fun. All the alternative people of the 19, I don't know what it was, what was that, 80s were all there. Well, so that's one thing we want for everybody to know, um, how to approach uh, basic health issues of acute disease and injury. And then also, though, we want them to have a sense of the history of herbal medicine. So there are classes on everything from Western herbalism, excuse me, Western herbalism, not medicine. So we have classes on the Western approach, the Chinese, the Ayurvedic, American Indian, Black uh, medicine, and I don't know if we have anything on Southern folk medicine, which is distinctive. We're trying to get that together with Phyllis. I don't think that's in that first year curriculum, but we will be doing that. Um, and not only so are you learning a little bit about Ayurvedic medicine's origins, but you're learning a little bit about Ayurvedic medicine and really the maybe top 10 remedies and top 10 ideas. Like we really do Vata Pitta Kapha. That's almost part of normal language today, but in the West, in America at least. But Vata Pitta Kapha, the thin, dry person, the medium, fiery, muscular person, and the thicker, overweight, or or susceptible to overweight person, a kapha person, and the combinations thereof. And everybody, as Brent Davis, a chiropractor, said, everybody either dries up, burns up, or melts. And thick, thin, and medium actually is the innate kind of sort of physiology or constitutional typology that works in medicine. And there's just cultures upon cultures and history and whatnot. And if we must have a class on that, it's certainly under Ayurveda at least. Yeah. Um, so you're learning some real basic concepts like that. You're learning some history. You're learning some of the nature wisdom. And with that, one of the favorite class almost of the whole thing, I think, is on the speech of nature or the rational method, which dominates our culture versus the um, Fossick, the indigenous method, really, which was everybody until about 500 BC. And the Greeks invented logic, so they named the old method phosis. And phosis is to allow the thing to speak for itself, to just say exactly what you see. And then if you have to expand on that, you have to do it by word plays, intuitive, imaginative, instinctive leaps and changes. And speaking in that method, you do not use logic. And so, like the classic, there's only two people who spoke that way in Western, exclusively in Western tradition. One was Heraclitus the Dark. He said, the road up is the same as the road down. That's just a fact. That's just a statement, but it's a statement about life. The empire rises and falls. The city rises and falls. The person gets older, matures, and then gets old, and it gets old. And Jesus was the other one. The kingdom of heaven is like. And both of these people, you get it very clearly. They hated to speak the other way, and they intentionally spoke only in those terms when they could help it. And so that and they were like last representatives of what was encountered like in the indigenous speech of the American Indians, where they just stated exactly what they saw, or they gave lessons that were you had to be paying attention to learn them. Several of my indigenous teachers, that was exactly the way they taught. And you have to deserve to know to learn. So that's somewhat true. So that's carried over into our curriculum. And we try to teach that awareness, like logic isn't everything and it has its limits. And I look upon this as a cultural um, problem to solve in all the people advocating this and that for indigenous people or third world or whatever. They don't or diversity. They don't realize that if they maintain the logical Western thing, if then we'll do this and therefore this will happen, they're just inflicting their culture upon everybody else. So that's a wake-up call. Almost nobody even thinks about that. I learned about it from, I'm going on here ad infinitum, but this is all good stuff. I learned about that from Robert Schmidt, the late Robert Schmidt of Cumberland, Maryland, a scholar of ancient Greek writings. And that comes out in his work, which John and Tara facilitated and set up a website, robertschmidtastrology.com.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's now run by Katie Higson, friend of Robert and Ellen, who passed away. Uh, and so a very, very, very interesting subject matter. And I actually would recommend a couple classes from him if just to, even if you're not interested in astrology, just to get that perspective upon the history of our culture, this culture, which has so dominated the world, and how we can move beyond it as he did. So that's kind of, and so then year two focuses more on the organ systems. And in order to have a holistic perspective there, we have to generate our own material. This isn't like made up science. This is a different perspective on science. And my book, Holistic Medicine, Holistic Medicine and the Extracellular Matrix, that, which is 2 years, I think, out of the press, Inner Traditions, that really nails down why the organism works in a holistic fashion. Holism is actually the truth, and the cell theory is a delusion. And with it, the germ theory is much more limited. And holism is really the way the organism works. And this is now proven through Alfred Pissinger's work on the extracellular matrix. He was a German physician, or excuse me, Austrian, and his school, the Vienna School, opposed the germ theory for 3 or 4 generations and finally proved it wrong. And he's a holistic physician. He died in the 80s. And so we have to generate, so we start with the matrix. The area around the cells controls the cells. The cell is not its own arbitrator or origin or ruler like we think we are in human society. And then from there we build up musculoskeletal system and so on and so forth, every system. Usually Phyllis and I lecturing, we probably 9 out of 10 classes, at least 8 out of 10 will be her and I and our alternative holistic view. And what's kind of exciting is that sometimes right in the middle of a lecture, we discover we have an intuitive flash. We bring something up that we both go, oh, wow, that's, occasionally a student brings it to our attention. And so that's really fun. We are still working on the holistic model, how to look at the organism from a holistic standpoint. Just very, very different. And that's how you have to practice herbal medicine. Another thing we learn in year 1 is energetics, hot, cold, damp, dry, or yin and yang, or vata, pitta, kapha, or the 6 tissue states, which are similar to hot and cold, damp and dry, tense and relaxed. And so in the second year, that's our main subject. And then the third year will be our clinical, and we're just starting to do a little bit of clinical now. And
We had
we'll
our
be,
first tongue evaluation class just the other night, which went fabulously.
yes, that is a great and interesting class. Is that going to be free online, or it's only for people, subscribers?
We did a preview on YouTube, so if you're wondering what the heck is tongue evaluation, you can see the good intro on YouTube. And this is currently just available to library subscribers. As you may have heard, some Marines, we have a new site under construction, which will be released very soon here. And so these offerings will be offered along on the new site. So currently, the tongue evaluation you can get if you are enrolled in the library.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. So exciting things happening as what we've generated in the past is it's been exciting since day one. Era can attest. And it was, I mean, this started, we started running. I mean, we like jumped and were running from the first. It was like crazy. We kind of have had to figure out when we founded because we weren't taking notes. What was the astrology of the moment? We're not sure.
Yeah.
Tara kind of figured it out, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
do more or less, but it's been very auspicious and a wonderful
yeah,
journey together. I was explaining in one of my interviews recently that it's been just very like the true meaning of fortuitous. Just
yes, yeah, right, right, and yeah, which means that we had it up and going before COVID because since 2020 or late 2019, the influences have not been fortuitous generally.
so where
Yeah.
would you say the concept of green power fits in?
Yeah. Okay. So this came up, and I have to thank my friend Judy Lieblin, and we were talking um, and it just came out just spontaneously. She said, I think she must have been to a conference or something and noticed how many herbalists look really younger than their days, than they should be, and stronger. And I mean, this is so obvious when you go to an herbal conference. And yes, we have had our casualties, mostly people with some weakness over many, many years. But the number of people that just are out there still farming in their 70s and looking quite young is very impressive. And um, so, so I would have to say, oh, gee, like Andrea and Matthias Reisen in Western New York State. I saw them 2 Februarys ago, I guess it was. Um, and yeah, there's still herb farming going on strong. A lot of fresh herbs that you would get either directly from them or through other companies come from them. And Judy and myself would be examples. And Tara does not look her age, but we're not going to tell you what age that is.
I'm not ashamed. I am 42.
Yeah, you wouldn't guess that. And I will be 70 in June, and I don't think you'd guess that mostly either. So, and I still swing the axe, not all day as the Australian folk song says, but oh, I love to split wood. It's kind of the only exercise I truly love. Um,
How about that, Matt? Matthew Wood likes to split wood.
yes. Yeah, I don't know where that came from. So that's the green power. And as Judy also pointed out, that's what Hildegard von Bingen is talking about. So she is a saint. She's more of a folk saint. I'm not sure that she has ever been sainted, but she officially by the church, it may have been, but if so, it's in the last 15 years. And that would be about, I think it's about 1100 to 11 something or other. Maybe she lived 1000s and 1100s, I think. And somebody wants to look that up and put it in chat or knows it offhand, that would be nice. Her dates are of living are known. She was a genius polymath and very accomplished for a woman. And that was a time period when a nun like herself could get a good education in a convent. That did happen. And actually, women were allowed to practice medicine to well, actually, at that time, it wasn't so limited. We can go into that some. She clearly practiced as, we'd have to call it a folk healer, but there wasn't very much difference between a folk healer and an educated doctor at that time, and especially in the Rhineland where she lived. I don't know that there were any educated doctors. And um, uh, so we can get on to medicine and women in the Middle Ages, in the Dark Ages almost. But she lived in the 12th century, I believe, flourished then. And she coined this idea of the viriditas, the green power, virid meaning green, and viriditas, the green power. And green, so vir viridita, I don't know my Latin that well, but it's related to the word for, actually, it's kind of been built. The word for power and green are actually related. Virile, is related to uh, virida, green. Um, so there's a word play there, which is that secret language of the indigenous people and the people close to the land. So that's the green power. And but she wrote about it. So she really actually um made it into a thing. And it got kind of forgotten down through the ages. It has been resuscitated. And I mean, I'd gotta say that it is a thing that we should perhaps keep more in mind because um, because so many of these herbalists are really healthy in appearance and length of life and so on. And that means that and whatever they're doing with herbs, they're touching them all the time. I actually feel this. So right now I'm in San Francisco, which is not as green as some places, but I'll tell you, I walk by little planters and things and find all sorts of herbs there. And the ones that are a little bit off the ground, you can trust that the dogs haven't peed on them, but whoa, there's an awful lot of dogs. And so you do have to make sure you are okay there. But I just constantly am eating some chickweed or something or other. Chickweed is very nice. That's one of the spring greens. Green pickin would start just about now. My great grandmother and the great aunt green pickin in Kansas in the old days. We can talk about that some. And so, and in fact, we're in the time period of the greening, because the plants are starting to come out in places like the Rhineland where she lived, or up into southern England, or of course, this isn't true for maybe Australia, it's going the other way. Uh, but through the temperate region, the southern temperate region, even in Minnesota, it's probably somewhat green there, Tara, right now, because the winter just about disappeared completely until the last week, I hear. But it's somewhat green, I think.
Not around here, maybe closer to the cities where it is a little bit warmer typically, but the snow has been melting quickly again, so it'll be
Yeah,
good moisture for the greenery because we have hardly gotten any precipitation.
yeah. There's a drought spreading slowly across the Great Plains. Um, yeah, march in like a lion, lion out like a lamb. But this was the other way around in Minnesota. In like a lamb and out like a lion. And then April, there will be some green on the ground. In May, there's the Mayflowers in the north there, but that will all be happening quicker. So this is a time of the greening starting and the green picking. And uh, and so this was acknowledged. The reason that we're having this class today is because this is Green Thursday or Maundy Thursday in English. I don't know what Monday means, but it was called Green Thursday, or that's a translation of the German. So this is kind of a little bit more the Central European a holiday related to Easter. So Easter is on Sunday, and we have various days before and after. And we also have Passover sometime around now. And at Passover, you always eat bitter herbs. And um, the Christians picked this habit up, and it both from the Jews and from the pagan. Well, I don't want to say pagans, just from what people ate. They just always ate bitters in the spring, and a lot of the greens are a bit bitter. And there's reasons why that helps people. We'll go into why you would be what you are eating when you're picking greens, green picking. And uh so but Green Thursday had some sort of, I don't know, mild liturgical meaning. It may have been put in there just to get the pagans to cooperate a bit. I don't know. If anybody knows more about Green Thursday. So if we have any Germans in our audience, they may know more about it. It's really not too important in English, plus England ceased to be a Catholic country. So some of those extra holidays dropped off the map. But okay, so Green Thursday, and definitely I do know you would make green soups. You'd make soups from your early green vegetables that are coming up, and in Central Europe or Northern Central Temperate Zone. And that would be part of the beginning of spring. And of course, Easter, the resurrection, is a springtime event. Excuse me, it's the crucifixion and the resurrection. So it is a death and rebirth sort of symbolism that fit in with the pagan calendar, with the Jewish calendar, with everybody's calendar, just with the weather. The last of winter and the beginning of the beautiful summer. So it's interesting then, midsummer. So Jesus was associated with this December solstice, winter solstice as his birth, because he was the dying and reborn king, which was true of which was the winter solstice also. And John the Baptist was his cousin, quote unquote, born 6 months apart, according to Book of Luke, and he was associated with midsummer and the green man. That's rather surprising, but John the Baptist was associated with the green man. And so we're getting the first hint of the green here. And I guess what would you say? Biologically as well as biologically. So, okay, you can make your own soup from whatever greens you want, but let's talk about green picking a little bit. And like I say, we're aiming towards that green power that so many of these older herbalists manifest. And I don't know that all of us were young and healthy to begin with. So maybe you slowly, I mean, there's a virtue to taking a specific herb that helps with such and such a disease. And there's a virtue to just constantly be eating a certain amount of greens and be touching them and working with them all the time, the way we are. So like I say, I walk by, everywhere I walk, I sample the greenery. So, okay, so green picking in the spring. Now, in the old days, we didn't have greens shipped in from Chile and New Zealand and Australia, or wherever they come from. Mostly Chile here in North America. And we would shipped in, we would all through the winter, you just had like salted pork and beef, and if you were lucky, or bread if you weren't too lucky, and butter and maybe some milk, and it was a lean diet with hardly any greens. Native Americans certainly made teas from roots, well, less the roots maybe in the north, but the barks, we say roots and barks is an old Indian expression, actually. We say roots in the north here in Minnesota, wrongly. And so they would make teas, twigs, and so things like pine, which prevented scurvy, and other other greens kept them going through the winter that they could get from spruce and things. But you can't take a lot of these real resinous plants, and so you're dependent on tree buds and sticks and the living tissue that's kind of still got life in it. Then finally comes the bloom of spring and the first green things, and you start picking. And this is a tradition of green picking, which I presume was certainly Native American, probably European as well, and certainly picked up by Blacks. I'm not sure that Africa, that there would be a green picking tradition there. But everybody in America in the old days, 19th century, 18th century, would be picking greens in the spring, back to the 1600s. And so you you started to eat these greens and you had to work them in slowly and you had to be careful. And I remember my teacher, indigenous teacher, he who must not be named, he said, spring fever was the fever you got from eating too many greens too quickly. So you had to be careful about it. You had to do it intelligently. And you had to keep on some of that salted beef, or in the native world, the venison constantly coming in. And so you were careful, and you had, that was a time to detoxify as well. Well, I ate that fruit fly. Um, um, so uh insect power. Um, let's see. So you started picking greens when as first they appeared, and many of these become too bitter later on. And certainly the very first, the thing that everybody in rural Minnesota would have known about, because this is English and Northern European, this is definitely German and Scandinavian tradition, is to pick dandelion greens in the spring. And I presume that this is pretty universal throughout North America, all nationalities. But you know, from talking to the old people, I know that it was kind of part of German and Scandinavian and even English folk tradition to be picking and eating dandelion green. And then there were many, many other greens. Right here on the Pacific coast, I just saw, you know, the milk thistle starting to develop. I was talking with Donna Bishop, wildcrafter up the coast there near Bodega Bay, and she was saying how it's so hard to get the seed out of the plant in late in the year that she buys. That's when she buys. She doesn't even think of making it on her own. But when the first leaves are coming up, it's a dicot, and like all the sunflowers, and you those first that first two leaves are so delicious. You fold them over. This plant only grows along the coasts in America, and it's from Europe. You fold it over and you eat from the seam, from the vein in the middle out towards the prickles. And if you really want to make a salad, you'd have to cut all the prickles off. But I just eat it that way, and I don't get a chance to eat it all the time. I did see one plant in Lake County, California, just this last week, but it was already beyond where I could eat it like that. But that is the best. Donna agreed with me, and she's eaten a lot of greens. The the first two leaves of milk thistle have the most archetypally beautiful lettuce taste of anything that we know of. So, um, you know, and imagine yourself being a starving peasant trying to, well, you don't want to overeat this stuff, as Hugh must not be named said, get your spring fever, but you do want to start eating these things and not miss out on stuff, and your eyes will be to the ground to pick things up. And um, so we have um many, many greens. Okay, so my great grandmother, who according to tradition was part Native American, but she was basically a Scots-Irish frontierswoman, and they intermarried with the native people and with just about anybody who like kind of fell off the English, that fell off the serious wagon of who's who in America, and then married down a notch into the Scots-Irish. And she did green picking, and my great aunt Pat, she said we ran into a spot of poverty at that time, and that was the when she was growing up, and she was the youngest child, and so they started picking greens again. They kind of great grandmother Maud Simpson, grandmother Simpson, she kind of outgrown that, but they had to start up again, and Aunt Pat started picking the greens with her. And she said she herself, Aunt Pat, only learned 16 greens, but her mother knew 24, which is the most of anybody. And then she learned one more Aunt Pat learned one more green from picking greens with a woman who was worked at Pendle Hill Quaker Center. And although this is a Scotch-Irish side of my family, both um, my grandfather was from the Quaker side, and but Aunt Pat actually married into the Quakers. So she was in Pendle Hill and Quaker Retreat Center in western Pennsylvania. And there was a black woman there who picked greens, and she and Pat were out there early and comparing what they knew. And she learned one more that her mother didn't tell her from Mrs. So and so, that woman. And Aunt Pat. So who else was at Pendle Hill at that time? None other than what's his name? Stalking the Wild Asparagus. Can't remember his name right now. Yule Gibbons. And Yule Gibbons, so he lived there, artist in residence, starving writer, starving author. Aunt Pat was rather critical of him not, he was so poverty stricken, he didn't really raise his kids that well, she felt. But of course, they became millionaires later because he became a millionaire. But so he wrote that extremely popular book, Stalking the Wild Asparagus, and all about, well, I wouldn't call it quite green picking, but wild asparagus being one green, which comes a little slightly later than things like um, chickweed and stuff. But and my Aunt Pat said, I taught that guy everything he knows. Now, and Mrs. So and so, the black woman, probably taught him too. But in reality, when I compared what she knew with what he wrote about, what he really loved desserts and kind of the fancier dishes that you could do with the wildest with the plants of the wild. And many of them are not spring greens, which was kind of a subsistence sort of a thing. And maybe that's why his book became somewhat popular, was that he included recipes that, you might want to eat if you lived on Fifth Avenue in New York City. But at any rate, he was a man for the moment, for the times, and boom, he became very powerful and the kind of very widely read in the kind of return to the earth time period of the late 60s or early 70s. His book appeared at just at the right moment, and I think it had very good, some of those publishers I've learned being published that some publishing companies know how to push a book and other ones don't. And I think he fell in with a good publisher. And but my great Aunt Pat was a little bit disapproving. Oh, he didn't really take care of his kids too well, he was starving artist. Um, okay, but so she did her green picking, and that remained a really valuable part of her life and something that she shared with her mother, and then went way back into pioneer times and Native American times as well. And as we see here, she learned from a black woman who was green picking as well. So this was a tradition that was thoroughly American, that everybody used. And, you know, black, white, Indian, English, Scots, Irish, German, Scandinavian. Um, I don't know about Florida and Louisiana and some places where the climate may be different, but even there, the wild pigs are starving until the saw palmetto berries form, and boom, then they fatten up, and the bears would fatten up on the same thing, probably even the deer too. So there's a spring change even down there in Florida with more green. Um, so uh, and I have to say, because first 2 years living in the Everglades there, the Everglades, that's very green. Wild meat was really a major diet on the reservation there. And my dad's the only person I know because I never met any of those people as an adult, but he, one meal he had tiger meat. That's Florida panther, sadly almost extinct, but they could hunt that on their own res, the Seminole people. Okay, so green picking. So that is wonderful. It's no longer really necessary. We can get greens all winter, et cetera, et cetera. But I would say, it wouldn't hurt you much to have chickweed. And Aunt Pat said that the virtue of chickweed is that you could throw it in the pot with the other greens, which were more bitter, like even dandelion green young, it's a little bit bitter, et cetera. It's not true of milk thistle. And you could throw it in and it would make them less bitter. Of course, you're actually either simmering or even pouring the simmering water over the bitters. You want to cook them long and you want to keep the lid on. The less cooking, the better. Kind of wish I'd gone and visited Aunt Pat. I interviewed her by telephone. Visited her, or maybe we could have done a green pickin. I was a starving artist myself at that time in the 90s, maybe. Um, so uh um chickweed is a excellent green that is not bitter. I mean, I don't know. I haven't tasted it, late in the fall before winter. If you can get it then, maybe still close to the ground. Maybe it does change, but it's really a lively little. It tastes better than a lot of vegetables, frankly. I'm not a great green vegetable fan. So, well, this is lime juice here, but uh, I'm not a great uh fan of vegetables, but I can tell you, so that one just tastes very nice. And when I was in Israel 2 years ago, well, be February of 2023, a year and a few months ago, speaking at the conference there. Can't remember the conference, but Rivka um organized it. I spent um I don't know 3 4 days at her house and her 7 kids and her husband, wonderful people. And uh her one of her boys, well, the oldest boy, second oldest, he was like psychic with plants. Like sh he'd make a great herbalist one day, and already is. He was about 13 or 14 or 15, and she asked him what he thought was wrong with this woman who'd come in, and he said, well, there's an infection under the skin and we can't see it and we can't get it. But if she puts yarrow on that, it'll draw it out, and she'll get more infected for. He was very precise for 2 days, and then it'll start to clear up. And indeed, it did. I might be representing that case history a little incorrectly, but I mean, it was really you kind of had to be psychic to figure out what he'd figured out, and neither the woman nor Rivka, who was taking the case, had any idea that this was true, but it was proved out. But more interesting than that was the one of the youngest brother. Um, he he never wore shoes if he could possibly help it. I did notice, without his mother's advice, that when we walked along a trail where there was a lot of broken glass and garbage dumped and things over the years, that he did uh um put on shoes on his own, sandals on his own behest. So he was sensible, but if he was just walking around on the pavement or in the around the house or up and down the town in the cities, this would be the Galilee. Um, he just didn't wear shoes. And then in addition, it turned out his favorite green and kind of his favorite food was chickweed, which his mother maybe had shown him what to eat, but he took it from there and that was his favorite. So, and she said, well, he doesn't really relate to very many people at all, but he really likes you. And he asked me, so you could kind of tell, so what would a guy like you, an unusual, what do you recommend in life? Kind of like life directions for future. And I don't know what when someone's 7 or 8, it's a little hard to tell them. Yeah, it caught me off guard. It was a very intelligent question though, and so I wish him well. He was an amazing, amazing kid with a great future in some sort of unusual area of life. So this is one of our cards, and we have a whole deck of cards which you can download for free. I believe, at least as I don't remember, but and there actually are available. We do make cards available. We're always selling out. And so chickweed, let's look at those pictures again. Um, Yeah, so that little flower is, only about never gets more than about 3 millimeters across. And in fact, yeah, that whole plant picture on the side, um, those are very teeny. If you look at that, that's blurred by being blown up. And the stem and leaf picture in the upper right-hand corner, that's more typical. And if there are any flowers there, they're almost invisible, and that would be very typical. It likes to grow really in a shady spot. Well, I mean, it grows all over in these boxes in San Francisco, at least, and it'll grow over. There's a type that grows just in the green grass, but in the lawns where I am, but it's a cousin. It's not the official one. The official one, if you got a fir tree or pine tree, really, or spruce tree of some kind, it often grows right under that in the shade, not maybe in the center where there is no light, but out on the edges. Very, very typical. But otherwise, it's growing all over the place. Evidently, it does well with acid soil, which you'd get under the spruce tree, but it grows everywhere else too. So I don't know that that is a limitation. But it won't grow out in the bright sunshine that well. So I would say it's the kind of thing that a real green picker would kind of cultivate by not picking at all and finding places where it would grow nicely along the edge of the woods and in semi-shade. So I don't know the season on it, but I've never picked it when it didn't taste good. So I can say that. Yeah. Okay, so the green power, Green Thursday, time to eat greens. But this was also when they ate bitter greens. And I can't remember the established Catholic Church um, method ideology on this. And of course, this is a combination of priests figuring out how to include peasants and their ideas. A lot of names of plants, I call it medieval Catholic folk religion. So St. John's wort blooms around St. John's Day. Solomon's seal used for magic that wasn't always bad at that time. And that would be wisdom. That would be King Solomon. He would represent wisdom. And crown of thorns, there would be a hawthorn, the maythorn, and various. So that's Catholic folk religion, but it was so traditional to have bitters in the spring to clean your blood, cleanse the blood. So that's going a little bit beyond just plain eating greens to cleansing. And of course, as the dandelions get a little more bitter, or if we turn to the root, we have a kind of sweet and bitter, which is almost a coffee substitute. And I love it so much, I'll advertise Dandy Blend, which is it's more chicory than dandelion, but it's really a delicious. Yeah, it's um yeah, backwards there. Um and that was actually made by Peter Gale, who I met at folk conferences, and he was even older than me and our whole generation. But he went to the trouble of going, he thought of himself as an herbalist, and he was, because he went to our conferences, the early conferences. He was an old guy that was already starting to get lame, and he made this one product on his Goosefoot acres in Ohio, the Dandy Blend, which is truly the best dandelion. Let's see, roasted barley, roasted rye extracts, roasted chicory root extracts, roasted dandelion root extracts, certified organic cultivation on those, all of them. So, uh, yeah, he had a big picture of a dandelion on it. I think that FDA or somebody gave him a hassle. Now I have to say dandy blend with dandelion because inferred a little bit more dandelion in there than there really was. When you roast things like that, you actually do, and that's the root, not the green. When you roast things, you don't get the medicinal power of dandelion. And in my opinion, the FDA or the USDA or whoever gave him a hassle should have laid off because that's not really, that's more of a vitamin mineral supplement type of thing. And wow, the first time, if I haven't taken it for a year, which now never happens, but it will, it just feels like this current of energy going through me. There's just so much minerals and vitamins. Dandelion, the leaf and the root is high in potassium, which makes the leaf a potassium sparing diuretic. So it pumps the kidneys without losing potassium. And potassium keeps the blood sugar down, maybe in some people who don't have enough potassium, because you need insulin, sugar, glucose, and potassium to boom, get it in the cell. So you need that potassium. Um, and so you could be digging the roots. And here I will learn from the goddess. That is a 5-year-old girl who taught a friend of mine. So it had just rained, and my friend was trying to dig up the dandelions to eat them out of her lawn with one of those tools. And this little 5-year-old girl came dancing down the street. And she said, "Oh, can I help?" And then she would grab the dandelion around the top, around the basal rosette of leaves and sticking out from the root. And she would grab it and boom, yank it out. And it turned out that when it had recently rained or you'd watered your lawn, the water in um, the water coats the root and goes down with it. It actually brings got a phone around here somewhere. It actually brings the water down deeper. Dandelion helps penetrate deep into hardpan and things, and it brings up minerals. And so it's a weed, but it serves a function. I can say, yes, there we are, picked out there. And see, those tops are on still present. I don't know who picked that, but they knew how to do it right. And now one of them, I think, yeah, sometimes you get a problem if you cut off the top, if you used your tool or shovel or whatever and went down a couple inches and snapped it off some previous year, then it'll grow two heads will grow often. And those are very hard to get out of the ground because you got to get under both of them and there's more resistance and you can't automatically pull that root up. So you got some trouble there. And but so it's a good habit to start developing this way of picking dandelion and forget about the tools and the shovels and breaking them off partway down, try to get them out all the way. Now I know when you're gardening, you do whatever you have to. But when you can, you try that method that boom brings it all up. And actually, let's go look at the picture again. So another thing we learned, so I taught in Erica Fargioni's program at Minneapolis Community Technical College, where they have a 1-year certification in herbal medicine. And they had a science class that everybody had to take. And the science teacher taught them that the distinctive layout of that leaf, of the way it's kind of, see how it kind of goes back into the center there, that actually channels water to the root, to the middle of the plant, which is the head of the root, and then it goes down. Yes. So water, when it's raining, goes down those leaves, flows down the leaf to the root and moistens the root. So not only is it getting the water you would expect, but it's getting a special amount of water. And then, boom, you pull that up like that. So both and those leaves are already bitter there. Those are beyond what you'd want to eat. But the root ought to be tasty and nice. And we would dry the root or even tincture it fresh to make the medicine, which is very good. Actually, most of the time it's semi-dried by the time I get it into alcohol. And so it is, well, it's a great remedy for heat going down into the tissues, into the bones and muscles. It's indicated by a mapped tongue, which, I mean, it's just specific again and again, almost never fails. And that's an indication that goes back to Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy of all people. I can hardly believe it. But the mapped tongue, very specific there. And yeah, there's a seed. And that indicates that heat is gone down in certain parts of your body, not in other parts. And the Chinese would call that phlegm fire. The the fire is boiling down the fluids to be phlegm, and the phlegm is trapping the heat. But in addition to fluids, it's also like it's in the tissues, and there's a resistance to the fire getting out. And so, and
And
this is very valuable. Yeah,
to show a picture of mapped tongue. It's
yeah.
not everybody's preference, so that's why I'm just giving you a heads up.
Okay, right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Which
Oh,
one would you say
oh
was the
my
best example?
holy cow. There's quite a few. All right. Almost all of those are a map tongue in one way or another. The second one from the left is more heat destroying the fluids there. The fluids are boiling off in that one. The first one, there's mapped on the top, there's that adhesive membrane, and then there's fire burning out. That person probably has heat in the lungs. It almost looks like a picture of the lungs there. The third one I can't see too well. Fourth one, they've got heat in the stomach there where it's burning off. Fifth one, wow, that is really a map tongue. I don't know what to say about that. And then in the second one in the next row, that's, yeah, good example. Third one, there's a lot of heat there. So that person has heat down in the intestines. That's the far region. Oh, as well as that, the heat rises. So there's some in the in at the top of the body, not in the heart, interestingly enough, off to the sides. I'm not sure. I'd be interested in taking a case history finding, is that in the sinuses or the top of the lungs or where, or the glands maybe.
That would
And
make that makes sense if it's sinuses and lungs, aren't they affiliated? Like in
yeah.
Chinese
Oh,
medicine?
well, sinuses and intestines.
Oh
There's
yeah.
also, yeah, a little peeling in the liver area, but that's just because the liver is probably overheated by all that heat down in the intestines. Also, that line down the middle, there's probably some red in there. That's not good. The spine is kind of being overheated, or maybe the stomach. And then finally, the last picture in the second row, yeah, it's ripping away there. That's heat. Even though there's a lot of cold looks on that tongue, the heat is ripping away. That's the gallbladder over there, maybe, or else just that region generally. Uh, so yeah, thanks. Wow, whew, a little bit of a nightmare there, but um, I
Well,
would,
it's worth mentioning again too that we just introduced a tongue evaluation class. Currently,
yeah,
it's only available in the library, but check out MatthewWood Institute of Herbalism.com and there will be more options in the near future to join that class and to view recordings.
yeah, yeah. Um, so. Everybody in those pictures could have benefited from dandelion root, not necessarily the leaf, and not a cooked or roasted root, but the fresh made into a tincture or tea, dried made into a tea. And tincture, small doses. I mean, we learned that indication from Hahnemann. He used 1 drop doses in his final, his homeopathic kit when he died, when he was, I don't know, 1846 or something. It was, the annotation says 1 drop doses. So I use a little bigger than that, but not a lot. But okay, so whatever's going on, that would be almost always a remedy for the map tongue. Well, so we learned something that's called a specific indication, and that's what we try to teach at um, the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism. Unfortunately, it's not always that simple. You don't get an indication like, wow, every single like, or this has happened to me though, like you get, oh, the rapid, non-resistant, full pulse, boom, 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 fever, heat having its way with the system. Oh, yarrow. There'll probably be 3 or 4 other remedies for that after 30 years. Like, wow, yarrow's the only one that matches that. Blue in the middle of the tongue, red on the sides, yarrow. I've never, it's like, oh, I'll probably learn a few other plants for that. Nope, never. Yeah, that tells us the sides that arterioles are not, when there's sides of the tongue are different from the center, the arterioles that convey the blood from the center to the circumference are challenged in some way. Okay, well, I wasn't going to talk about tongues that much, but that's specific medicine. That's what we try to teach. That's what we try, hope people learn, but that's only one part of herbalism. Another is like the green power, the nature's vitamin pill, tonics, just the goodness of Mother Nature and the green plants in general. Um, Phyllis Light teaches some about vitamins, minerals. I'm less on that. All this is positive. Sometimes, and then we have learned we have a few tonic herbs in Western herbalism, quite a few, but tonic often meant an astringent, but a sweet tonic like in Chinese medicine that builds you up, or like Shatavari from Ayurveda. And now we have adaptogens, which are yet another category. They're not the same thing as a tonic, and they help you adapt to stress. That means usually the cortisol side of the adrenaline. One reaction is inflammation, specific immune strategies. The other is like, oh, one size fits all, just suppress it all with cortisol. And those adaptogens tend to help that side, which can be too weak or too strong, in which case you wouldn't need it as so much. So we have all these categories. I hadn't meant to get into that, but we saw such good indications for specific herbalism. We have to mention that that's not everything, although that's my kind of harness that I'm a horse who can only see the specific. Like, whoa, there's something that's not specific. um, Remember what I said? My 100th flower blossomed to be a specific herbalist. Okay, the green power. Let's see what time it is here. Okay, we've been at it for an hour. I don't know that we'll go a full 2 hours with this class. We weren't sure. The green power, let's see, I had some further ideas. Well, you are getting how many different things we can do with herbs, all the way from just drinking the dandelion tea, eating the fresh little leaf, to using it as a specific medicine, to using it as a fun beverage. It's just a whole lot of stuff. And all of it's going to give us this green power viriditas, where we are going to really, I think, live longer and more healthy, even though we're not following some ideology. We're just being exposed to we're getting them on our hands, we're nibbling on them all the time, we're eating them in our diet, taking the teas, etc. Even when we're not being specific, we're getting a lot of inflammation. No, a lot of input, a lot of health input. I remember a story. This is just anecdote, but there was a guy from Lebanon who had enough medical training. He was a teacher for some time in maybe the 90s and at John Bastyr College, it was university now, in Seattle, the naturopathic college. And he came over from Lebanon and started teaching, and he found himself getting sick on the American diet. And he finally he realized, well, I was always healthy in Lebanon, so I need to get back on my diet, which was always just to have culinary herbs, thyme, rosemary, oregano. Oregano would be real big in the Levant. Um, uh, Basil. Yeah, we know those all, but we don't eat as much of them. And he had gotten out of the habit, and he incorporated those back into his diet, and he got healthy again. No, that's anecdote, and I heard it. Maybe it's wrong, but it's like fits my philosophy, our philosophy, everybody. It fits that you take, that all those herbs have influences that, you don't have to have a map tongue to benefit from dandelion, because it purges out deep heat, phlegm, fire from deep. It'll get that out. And you don't need to be sick with an acute disease to benefit from wild oregano or thyme. You don't need to be old and losing your memory to benefit from rosemary, although it is rosemary for remembrance. William Shakespeare, that is true. It fits in there with all the other memory remedies like bacopa and ginkgo and things like that. Wood betony too, that are good for the mind as you age, the mind and brain, keeping the circulation good there. So just the culinary herbs, keeping those in your diet. I would say parsley flakes. Um, I'm keen on, I have no idea whether I'm short on potassium or not. I probably am not because I've eaten so much parsley. Another thing you find along the street there in San Francisco here and there. Um, but parsley leaf dried, uh, like if you were to study acid and alkaline reaction foods, and they're just some are acid and some are alkaline, and you'd be surprised that you start going up the scale from 0 to 10, and at 10 there's parsley, and then second down the line is celery, which is high in sodium as well as potassium. Not as high in potassium, high in sodium. You can taste that. You can taste the salt in celery, and celery comes from the ocean edges in Europe and maybe the Middle East. And so, it will help you if you don't have enough sodium, and help you if you don't have enough potassium. So those are alkaline salts, and some people are too acid, some too alkaline, and that can help. In the old books now, it's the opposite of what you'd think. The acid, if your tongue's real red and like the map tongue there, and some of them very red, you would want you actually want acids, um, because if you're eating acids with your food, that lessens the need for the acid secretion, which is kind of burning your tongue and your stomach, and that begins to stop that. And I have not used that a great deal, but that was from Scudder, the specific indication doctor of the Civil War period and later. And that's well attested also in allopathy and everything in the 19th century. So they'd give the acids when the tongue was red, and then alkaline salts when the tongue is pale. Looks like I'm kind of pink in the middle. Reasonably healthy. I tend to be red, if anything, never, almost never pale. And so pale tongue, then potassium, sodium, calcium, the salts, and best taken through your foods like that. Um, no, dandelion root is high in calcium. Any of those, you can see these in some of the plants. Any plant that's really white roots, like all the bone remedies, the comfrey, not that I'm a great fan of comfrey root, but it can be used in some instances. Comfrey root, white root under the, peel off the black on the outside, white. Same with the dandelion, peel off the brown, white. Black cohosh, which is more of a cerebral spinal fluid remedy in the spine. We're gonna have a class about that. My friend David Milgram, the chiropractor from uh, Sedona, Flagstaff, who me and him have been talking about cerebral spinal fluid since we were 25 years old. It's like 40 plus years. Um, he's a chiropractor, which means he has his hands there around the cerebral spinal fluid all the time. And so uh, we have so the white in the root indicates the bones. That one's good for the spine too. I don't, that almost indicates a calcifying quality. Also, stems that stick above the snow in the wintertime, there's a lot of strength in there, and they're going to be high in silica too, like motherwort, and excuse me, calcium. Motherwort, which he must not be named. The old on his res, the old ladies, as he said, used the formula they used for osteoporosis was bone set, which doesn't have a white, it has a whitish flower, doesn't have a white root, I don't think. But we crack the stem and it's like a broken bone. Crack. Bone set and motherwort with a little bit of lobelia to make it go wherever it should go, to the spine. And so there we have a great herb herbal formula for those bone for calcium. So potassium, generally the leaf gets dark green, like our friend parsley, or maybe nettles. Also with iron, it gets green, darkish green. So we can kind of see this with you can always taste the sodium in a plant. Not that many plants in the middle of the country. Maybe along the seashore, yes, they might be salty in their taste, but not as many in the middle of the country. But celery, yes, there it is. It has that. Okay. Um, so those are greens from the supermarket. I really do recommend parsley, and I've learned to like that taste a lot, kind of crave it sometimes. It is kills the blood. It's a diuretic. There's a great heart tonic. Hildegard von Bingen. Look up her heart remedy. Really, when my pulse was low and really low, and I felt like, oh, I might pass on. It's time for me to go. Maybe I was gonna live a little longer. I thought, it's like, wait a second. That's the pathology of the illness talking. And I took St. Hildegard's parsley honey wine and whoop, heart back to normal. Um, I don't know it for any other pulse, but a low pulse, and that feeling, and that's specific. Dorothy Hall mentions that in her notes for students. It's not in her main book, but that's the specific mental state that calls for that remedy. And then Hildegard von Bingen made up this heart tonic. What did they know about the heart in the 12th century? Not much that modern people know about, but she knew the pulse goes down, a person's, you lose your spirit, your heart in that sense. And so parsley, honey wine, and of course, life takes care of you if you're friends with the greens. So I'm starting to have that, and I have a client, and she says, "Well, you need the parsley, Hildegard's parsley honey wine." So I take it, did it. So you take a bottle of wine, not sweet, organic, yes. Um, pour it into, get it up to a simmer in a pot, then put in a cup of honey, maybe a little less. I don't know. I found that a little sweet, but of course I started with a sweet wine. Nope, wrong. Um, Put in, she said about 10 to 12 sprigs of parsley, but I found that if you pick them from your garden, they're bigger. And then that's 10 or 12, what she was talking about. If you get them from the store, you need about 18 or 20. And you put them in there, you're just simmering it just barely. You put in some vinegar, quarter cup of grape vinegar she wanted, and then you turn off the heat. You usually you evaporate off enough water that you can pour the whole thing back in the wine bottle, and it will preserve for, I don't know, up to 6 months in the refrigerator, certainly. And a test from experience. And then a tablespoon once or twice a day. So there's a recipe that's in the book by Strelo. The book Hildegard von Bingen's Remedies. It's Strelo is a German physician. Hope he's still with us. Um, and my friend Sebastian Liu, who's co-teaching the class on tongue diagnosis, Sebastian from Singapore, he has studied with Dr. Strelo in Germany, and he knows Hildegard medicine, as it's called, pretty well. He kept on referring to Galangal yesterday or the day before on our class because that's a heart remedy, heart tonic he learned from Hildegard medicine, which is a cousin of ginger. So what ginger is the stomach, Galangal is kind of more to the heart, a stimulant, a warming stimulant, and that's good. There's been a lot of damage to the heart from COVID itself and the vaccine, which is a imitation of COVID. So it's going to cause the same problems a lot of the time. So, and then there's just the stress of the last 4 years, a lot of stress. I think the heart has been hit hard. So I can't say this tonic is for everybody, but it's a nice one to have around. There's other, and there's Hawthorn and there's other heart tonics, which are a really good way to go with the heart because they're foods, they're safe, they're not a problem. Um, and you don't need to be all dodgy, artful dodger with the doctor and everything because they're just what people eat. They make hawthorn berry syrup and jellies and things like that. Well, let's see. I'm kind of running out of steam. What time is it? Let's see, well, we've almost got an hour and a half. And really, we didn't announce it, but if there's some questions and comments, if there's any people who have their own experience with green picking and have some greens to talk about, and if there's any questions about all this, I can answer them. We didn't announce that, but we're certainly open to questions, and I have enough steam for that. If anybody knows more about Monday or Green Thursday, I'd be interested in that too. So it's a tradition that's kind of died out. Yeah.
Pascal commented about the recipe does call for adding the honey just at the end, and I do go by the Ayurvedic suggestion that to not cook honey, and
Oh,
so
yeah, definitely.
I wait until the liquid has cooled and then I add honey personally.
Yeah, okay, and that's not just Ayurveda, that is modern science. Yeah. Hildegard actually wanted you to cook the honey, but honey is a living substance, and you want to put it in after the you no longer are simmering it. So vinegar you could put in at any point. Um, Vinegar will extract the minerals a little better. Did Hildegard know that? I don't know, but that's in her recipe. So you are right. Yeah, thank you.
And I've
Um,
made it with Pinot Grigio, and that works well. And then I've had it before with, I believe it was, I'm pretty sure it was a Syrah, not Shiraz. Pretty sure it was Syrah, and that was really good also.
you made these and kept them around the house, or just people you know has made them?
I've made it with Pinot Grigio pretty much exclusively. And then remember back in the day when Lee made it from the Syrah, she brought it to class one day and shared it.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
really good.
yeah. Good.
And
I'm
Levia
not,
found,
I'm not a great cook here, so anybody can improve upon these recipes. Yeah.
Livia says it's called Monday, Thursday 2 from mandatum, meaning commandment related to mandate.
Oh, um, huh. Well, that's interesting. Did they mandate that the Thursday you had to eat greens? I hope not, but maybe they were being Christians, they were thinking of shifting from the uh
The old
ten,
law or bringing back.
yeah, from the Ten Commandments to grace. That's interesting. Huh. Yeah. I should say the Passover bitters, as I've had Passover dinner, um, that's the only complaint I have about Passover dinner is that I've never had bitters that were real bitters at a Passover dinner. The tradition amongst Ashkenazi, especially Eastern European Jews, is to use a horseradish, which is hot. It's not bitter, it's hot. So in America, we use the word bitter for anything that tastes bad. And bitter is actually, well, that dandelion has a sweet and bitter flavor. So we use it for acrid, which is almost okay because acrid tastes so bad and it kind of makes you shiver. Ooh. And so lettuce has gone to seed. That's too bitter if you taste the leaf. That's bitter and a bit acrid. So barberry root, bitter. Oregon grapefruit, bitter. Those are what really, and originally in the Middle East, marubium, that means bitter. That's white horehound. It grows in the desert, grows in the American desert now. Now, those are bitter, and in my opinion, bitters really stir up the emotions and bring bitter experience up and out. So there was a reason for having bitters in the spring. Also, it gets the secretions of the liver and the digestive tract going more. So yeah, but it was like, yeah, not everybody wanted to eat bitters all the time, but this in the spring, it's like a religious cleansing that both these cultures had, and maybe other ones too, to eat the bitters. And horseradish is not a bitter. So anybody who has Passover dinner and wants to improve upon that, they can go out fishing for and finding some bitters. I mean, even parsley has a slight bitterness to it. A lot of the vegetables have some bitterness. Yeah.
I
Okay.
had an aha about the mandate. So Monday, Thursday is on the day, right, of the Last Supper. And Jesus gave the mandate to his disciples. That was the first time they received the Eucharist. And
Oh,
he gave them a mandate to wait until the Holy Ghost would arrive. They had to remain in the city until the Holy Ghost would arrive. What was it, 40 days later? Was it 40? I'm thinking 40 because that's so count, or is it 50 days later?
probably 40 more likely.
Probably.
Oh,
So they
wow.
did get a mandate.
So the Last Supper was not on the Friday, which would have been Sabbath, Shabbos. No, he was crucified on that day. And yeah, and the Romans wanted him dead before the sunset. Yeah. Okay. So and then was in the grave and arose on Easter Sunday. So we have so that is interesting. So wow, it's interesting that they mandate that they were thinking in terms of eating greens on at the Last Supper.
I
Of
don't know
course,
if they're mandated to eat greens.
yeah.
They'll, Levia says Google explains it more. So
Oh, okay.
we're all, we'll do our Google research afterwards.
Yeah. Well, when you got a bunch of peasants, they'd maybe run out of their salted pork and beef by that time, and even their chickens and eggs, so maybe they only had greens left.
Yeah.
So,
Recently, I pickled some vegetables. I made I'm gonna guess how you say it in Italian. It's an Italian recipe. Is giardiniera, and so like it's a garden vegetable mix. And so you put cauliflower, broccoli, it had cabbage, carrots, and you pickle them. But it was Italian flavored. You put some parsley and oregano in there as well. And I made a roast, and roast is great by itself, but I made it with the roast and it was like so refreshing. Like the roast just digested so well
wow.
af- with that. And I just craved having it together. And I thought, oh, this is why our ancestors, pickled so much. Like you were naturally going to eat a lot of that heavy food and they really go so well together as, of course, Weston Price or Sally Fallon in her cookbooks
Yeah.
elucidate, but until you experience it, it's like, oh, that makes sense.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not enough of a cook to see the holistic picture. You're adding a lot here. Yeah, what else do we have? Other comments at all? Yeah.
Oh, just a number of things. We have the link for Olivia was referring to Wikipedia Monday, Thursday. And so that's the one she's referring to that has more information. Pierce is saying the Last Supper was a Passover Seder. How do you say
Seder, yeah.
Seder?
Seder.
Just adding. Um, And Allison's saying, so funny, I just began reading my new Hildegard book of herbalism this morning. Yeah.
Yeah. She probably has something on Monday, Thursday somewhere, but I don't know that that got picked up in the books in the English translations or even the
Xia Lian is wondering, is arugula bitter too?
arugula is a little bit hot, so that's going in a different direction, but there's probably some bitterness there. Certainly if you let it go a little too far, almost all the greens turn bitter after a while. But arugula is eaten more for its heat. Yeah.
I love
So,
arugula for
oh, okay.
some reason, but
Yeah.
Olivia's asking, was Hildegard also a musician, a composer?
Yes, all that. Yeah, I said I was going to talk about Hildegard. Well, I was going to talk about women in the Middle Ages. So, um, so medicine, so medicine died down with in the West, in Western Europe, with the destruction of the Roman Empire, and which eventually in Italy was really by the Byzantines, not by the Germans. So it became almost extinct, but the Benedictines tried to keep it alive. And the Benedictines saved the books in the libraries. The Monte Cassino that was bombed to smithereens in World War II, that was really kind of the major hangout for medicine in um, in southern Italy. And um, it still did not really, really most of the most of the medicine is still things like the Leech Book of Bald in England, or the Welsh, the books of the Medfi herbalists, is folk medicine, or I don't want to prejudice, but it's more indigenous. It's not the Greek tradition. And so that started to come back. So in the 10th century, I think in the 900s in Salerno, it's said that the legend is that a Muslim physician, oh, so they were all taking shelter under a bridge while it was raining, and there was a sick Sicilian man, young man, and then there was a Muslim physician and a Jewish physician. Was there one other? But it wasn't an Italian or a Latin. And they were trying to help this guy, and they realized that they, spoke the same medical language. And so they founded then a school. And I think the legend just shows you that the founders of the School of Salerno, which was the medieval school, were diverse. They were not actually the native people there, because they had forgotten how to they had forgotten their Greek medicine. Well, so this started going, and the Benedictines in nearby, Monte Cassino's not that far away, and other places, they immediately tried to help them, wanted to help them and get this going. And I think the original, they used an apothecary. Well, so in the Dark Ages, we do know this, like from Charlemagne's charter, that what the monasteries and the convents and the royal palaces were supposed to grow in the garden to provide the medicines. There were 75 herbs, mostly following the Greek tradition, but not entirely. And some of them are just peas and beans and their foods, really, but they still use them medicinally. Mediterranean herbalism was really very food, much, much more food oriented, not like American Indian medicine or even German or Russian medicine, where there's more medicinal use. It was much more food. Just eat the right foods and put the person in bed and feed them, a soup or something. That's much more the Mediterranean, with less knowledge about what the action was. And in 812, Charlemagne passed this law. Everybody had to have those gardens. And this was the latest public health thing. And his son-in-law, we're going to get to women as doctors. And so his son-in-law was Alfred the Great, King of Southern England, and he instituted those laws. And even off there in wild, wild Wales, they instituted those laws because this was the latest health directive, and everybody wanted to do it. So that was going on. So this very simple food medicine, and Hildegard's medicine does resemble this. But in the 900s, they began to get the School of Salerno going, and this then develops. And actually, interestingly, so most of the great doctors of the Middle Ages were Arab surnamed, but I studied this with Judith Hill. Half of them were Jews who had, I mean, even when they were named Masha Allah, he was still a Jew, even when Allah was in his name. But so Moses of Allah, that would be. And so he so it was the Jews and the Muslims that came up, founded that school. But it's very interesting. I just every once in a while I get somebody who's so totally out of character. Wow, we're Napoleon or Alexander the Great. Well, so there was Constantine the African, who was a Berber from a tribe in the sand of the desert, and he was given a village, but they were wanderers, and he wandered up into Italy, and he was both literate and became literate and was a great doctor, and he really put Salerno on the map. And Constantine the African is often quoted in the text. That's in the 1000s maybe. Well, so 1000s, that brings us to Hildegard, and already the Greek books are spreading, and you have Hildegard commenting on the Greek tradition. I have to say, from what I read, it looked like she was kind of self-taught, but still she's learning the Greek concepts and applying them. And so there's a little bit more energetics and organized medicine, etc. And during this period in the 900s, 1000s, 1100s, 1200s, definitely women were physicians as well as men. But the great number of physicians were monks and nuns, and they ran the infirmaries, just as are so many hospitals today are still descended from the Catholic sisters and whatnot. And this was very common, and this was the medicine of that era. And then about 1200 something, um, I don't think it was a power play. I think the Pope and the cardinals, they decided they didn't want all these lay people going into monasteries and convents all the time to get their medicine. They passed a law. If you wanted to be a doctor or doctoress, you had to leave the convent. You had to go out into the world and practice there because they were no longer, they wanted the monks and the nuns. There must have been monks and nuns who were sick of this and wanted to meditate and be by themselves and not be mixing with the hoi polloi or with the wrong word there, with the general public. So they passed this law, and all those people, they flooded out into the regular world in the 1200s and became the physicians of that era. This still included women, but almost immediately, like the school in Paris, they began trying to ban the women, and the women as physicians last into the 1300s in Italy, where it was well established, and less and less as time passes, and they become nurses. So now they start to found hospitals, and there are nuns, and some of them must be doctors again. And this becomes more associated with the women again, the hospitals. They're not founded by the monks as much. So that's kind of a general overview and the separation of church and state there, and church and medicine. And by the time we get to the 1600s in England, there's only like 20 physicians that have a Greek education, and they've been educated down in Paris, and there's hardly anybody and herbalism is kind of controlled in the first 7 miles around London. Out after that, it's all just nurses, old ladies, guys, the occasional doctor who wants to live out there, or some such person. So, okay, I can't think of much more. We have a question there though, or several maybe. So let's,
We do, and I actually found out what the mandate is, but we can conclude with that. Uh,
okay.
Charles says, "What do you think of periwinkle?"
I haven't used it much, but I think very highly of it. That's another cerebral tonic. And I don't know if that's a modern usage, but the pharmacology, yeah, since the 1940s at least, the pharmacology has been brought out, and it's really looks like a very exceptional cerebral tonic. I did write up about that in my book, The Earthwise Repertory, because I was interested in it. I've tasted it, but I haven't actually used it in practice, and I really should. I should get good at what's good for your mind as you get older, but I've just been lazy. As you go through different epochs of life, you have different clients and different things going on. Yeah. Okay. Good question.
Well,
Thank
that's
you.
the last question. I have a few things to share here at the end, including where people can pre-order your new book as well.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
A shamanic herbal.
Yes. So, shall I share the mandate first, or should we shall share about your?
So we'll mention, so that's from Inner Traditions. I don't have where you order that from or get on that, but I imagine it's already on Amazon. They say it's coming out there it is, yes, in um, July. And yep, so it's time is approaching. It's a great book. It's probably, well, all my books are so good, but it's really a great book. Oh, Simon and Schuster, do they own? They must own Inner Traditions by now. Huh. Wow, I've moved up in the world
Yeah.
publishing wise.
Yep. I pre-ordered mine today.
Ah, yeah.
So there's that, and also we also have a full class on women and herbalism by you and Phyllis D. Light. And so those who are looking to learn more and wanting to dive deeper, it's really a very comprehensive class with some great bonus material as well.
Yeah, and I think actually this is a little bit more Southern folk medicine. I mean, Phyllis learned from her grandmother, who was a Creek Indian. And so it's a little bit more folk tradition. I don't know if I did mention it. I can't remember if I did talk about the Middle Age, medieval, but I probably did mention the great Trotula, the famous female physician of Salerno who wrote the gynecology books that were kind of the basic standard, whether you were a woman or man practitioner through the Middle Ages, late Middle Ages. So that's good the way it should be, that there really was a female medicine written by a female. Um, and she didn't write it, but a book on cosmology, cosmetics got appended to that. And some of her other books were lost. And it just, they didn't really know who wrote what. But her basic writing, Trotula, does come down to us. So, yeah.
Well, stay tuned for more. For those of you who are checking this out or catching this on YouTube, we are often offering, every month at least, we have a freebie, a free offering. I think you got all of the gestures that are available through Zoom. You got the balloons, you got the confetti, the thumbs up. Just
Where
have
did
to.
that come from? Who's doing that to me? I like it.
So, last but certainly not least, the mandate
Yeah.
was a new commandment. In the Gospel of John, after the departure of Judas from the Last Supper, Jesus tells his remaining disciples that he will be with them for only a short time. Then he gives them a new commandment, stating, "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another."
Wow. Well, that's about as good a commandment as you could have. Wow.
I'm sure.
Uh,
Well, with that, it's a lovely note to end with. Love to all of you. We're getting hearts here on
yeah,
screen.
thank
Thank you
you.
so much. You all
Well,
have
we have a question, but that was too good a place to end. So sorry, you'll have to ask that in another class.
another
Bye,
time.
Betsy. Bye, everybody.
Bye. There'll be plenty of opportunities.
Yep.
I'll stick around in case any of you have any questions for me, and just for a moment here. And thank you once again, everybody. Those of you on YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe. All of you share if you found this helpful. If someone came to mind you think this might be helpful for, make sure please share with them. I'll put a link to the YouTube video that is being generating as we speak here into the Zoom chat here, so you know where you can find that as well to view once again. So it's been a pleasure, everybody. It always is a pleasure to do these classes with and for you. Good to see you virtually. Take care. Have a wonderful evening, everybody, or day, wherever you are. Take care. Bye-bye.